Hello, Dr. Mike here for my CIS-2640 Network Security / Security Plus students. This is topic 15, usually week 15. Again, the time of this recording, it's week 15, which coincides with the book at the time of this recording, which is chapter 15. So it is on risk mitigation. This will be a little quick. I will bring up a part of this chapter that I really didn't talk about in other areas. I've already spoke to some of these things, so in actually the previous, in the chapter 14, business continuity, and then also in chapter 13 on vulnerability assessment. So you'll see it in the slides here, but I really have cherry-picked through those. Again, this is, in this edition of book is chapter 15, but it is titled Risk Mitigation. And you can see we're going to see really it's about managing risk, describing it, and what kind of practices you have. There's one specific thing I really want to bring out of this, and this is really sort of the capstone chapter, I think, for this course, because this is what it's about. Everything from when you started learning, network scanning, vulnerability, identification, testing hacks, almost, pen testing type stuff. It's all really in the guise of risk mitigation. It's about reducing risk, and it really is about, at least I know this is for the government, it's about resiliency. Almost planning, as much as you do risk mitigation, something will happen, and how can you bounce back from it quickly? And that goes back to the previous few chapters. So there's some stuff here that you might see is a little repeat, but I'll jump over that. So again, know your risks, right? That's it. So first off, what is risk? It's there. And then understand how to manage risks. What does that mean to manage them? So by assessing them and finding mitigations, transference of those risks, or just acceptance of them. And these risks, again, can be environmental, man-made, external, internal, external. Some of these have greater impacts. The internal risks, of course, the insider threat being one of the hardest ones to defend against. But again, environmental, Mother Nature, right? So we look at risk as a blanket. It covers everything and comes from all areas. So you can see here too is this slide for telling you is where the risk could be. Is a category of the risk. It's a strategic, compliance. So these are pretty easy. Compliance, you need to have HIPAA compliance. You need to be PCI compliant. There's rules to follow for that. Financial and so on, but there's operational, technical risks, managerial risks. So in other words, and that's funny, was you look at like a long-term illness of a company president, so there's stuff like that. What if, there's that one person, we have that one system admin that knows how everything works. What happens if they get the old hit by a bus adage? So yeah, this goes deeper than just go down to the level of, hey, does our department system administrator, do we know what happens if they're gone? What happens if the CIO is kidnapped? So it can really break on a lot of areas here. It goes more than just, we normally see if cybersecurity is, this SQL injection and viruses, fire floods, but there's a lot of areas you got to consider when it comes to this. Talked about this already. This slide really goes back into assessing risk. But also, we talked about vulnerability assessment and, of course, business continuity planning, supply chain assessment. If you are dealing with really high security, understanding where your stuff comes from could be part of your risk mitigation plan. So keep that in mind. And, of course, testing. This has already been talked about before. Internal testing, pen testing, vulnerability scans, risk calculations, and so on. I'm going to talk about right here is incident management, which we sort of talked about in the previous chapter. But actually, really is one here is change management. This is going to really be the hub of everything. It should be the hub of everything. Your change management, how does it work? So, testing, pen testing, non-intrusive, intrusive. I'm going to go through all this. We've really touched upon these already. Testing should be part of any business continuity, vulnerability assessment, and of course risk mitigation plans. So change management is a good one here. So how do we manage change? And this is a big deal because a lot of times risk does get creeped in from some changes. We update we want to buy new servers. We want to update to the latest OS on our desktops, things like that. We need to have a plan for that, and you need a plan for change itself. So first off, got some tools here. There's the US CERT site's got some great tools here. Cyber Resiliency Review. They have documents such as this. This is brand new MITRE ATT&CK framework infographic they just put out. I just downloaded it to look it over. Mapping techniques. So there's stuff that you can grab. It could be as simple as this, just to review, look it over. It could be a guideline to help you look down over here to PDFs, access management, control management, configuration change management. That's again right there. There you go. So again, maybe you don't need to have to fall under CERT guidelines, but you find yourself lacking any kind of documentation. You start here. You can look for here. Where you begin, right? Define roles and responsibilities. It's a good point right there. We never think about who's in charge of what, and it should be documented, right? This goes back to the management thing. Just a lack of organizational management. Who has the final say-so when signing off on risk? People say, "Well, I think the CIO does." Yeah, but what about the CISO? What about the executive manager for the department? This should be clearly documented. So, because I can sign for that risk, and actually they can't. And you can see the issues here. So, CERT's a great resource. Again, here I am again. Yes, Dr. Mike Sprinkup missed again. 853. This is again for federal, but it's security and privacy controls. And for managed MIS, so I think this is 128. Yeah, this is 53. 128, get the wrong one up here, is the publication for configuration management. This should be part of definitely of any of your vulnerability assessments, how you manage your configuration, and this rolls into our change management system. So again, there's a lot of different information out here you can refer to. SIST, SANS probably has reading room stuff on it. That's a pretty cool graphic there on MITRE ATT&CK framework. Again, stuff you can find here on CERT. But and this is one I've used here. So here's an example. Change management. You don't have to use this. I bring up Jira because it's been in a lot of places I worked. This is like the main area. And I know it talks about agile teams, but it has this sort of hub of planning change. Planning and tracking. What's going to the next release. But inside of here are things like, hey, is the server being patched? I found out, a cross-site scripting vulnerability in our web page. How do you get that change in? And more important, you just don't fix it. You just don't change the code in production. You just don't upgrade everyone's desktop to the latest version of Windows. Especially if it's mission critical, you test it. So just change management has a way to go ahead and plan, track, and release, and also have a plan to roll back. Very important. I've seen it before in production releases for a company I used to work at full time. They would part of their planning was, okay, first has it been approved? Yes, it's been approved by whoever or what level needs to sign off on it. It has all the details. It's been tested. Now, what's the plan to roll back if it still breaks? It doesn't matter how much you test. When it comes to actually putting that code on live production, stuff happens. So, and this information here, stuff can roll back into our vulnerability assessment, business continuity planning, our risk assessments. What do we have? What version? What patch? This is be used also to show that we have something in place for change management. So I use Jira. There's open source. There's a ton of different stuff here. It's just one I've used a lot. You can create these roadmaps and plans. These are important to have, whether it be in Jira or just Microsoft project, I think it was, whatever you use, a Visio diagram. What's upcoming? Because you might spot something in cybersecurity and go, whoa, that looks like a pretty big risk. We have a plan to change something. And yeah, we're testing these aspects, but no one has addressed testing security. So this could be brought to light early. If it's found early, and especially design, it can be fixed and tested cheaper than it is to roll it out and fix it later, or even worse, have it be discovered later by an attacker. So change management is going to be a real huge area here, and this is really what this is about. Most of my lecture here is going to be about change management, because the rest of the chapter itself really does cover things we sort of already talked about. Managing risk, threat assessments, risk assessment, troubleshooting common security issues. There's some good stuff in the chapter here. Definitely look it over. I'm not going to read it to you, but look at the summary though. So again, look at the rest of the slide deck here, which is only a few more slides left. Again, changes to system architecture, changes to file or documentation classifications. Again, understand change. Really, that's what it comes down to. And change management team. This is where a good project manager is worth their weight in gold. Someone can help make sure that everyone's checking the right boxes, doing the right things. So also, who has the final approval of these changes? Again, you might see people from all areas, not just IT. You might have network security. You might have cybersecurity, forensics. Maybe might be inside there. Accounting, HR. There's a lot of areas that come into play here. So each change, the change management team might have reps from different areas that may not all weigh in each change, but they will at least have a visibility to those changes. So privilege management. This is really back. This slide really goes back into I'm trying to say, authorization and management. So I don't know why this is here, but it should be something that should be audited. That's probably the important thing as part of this change. Auditing is very important. So with a good incident response management, has good handling, has good documentation, and it's been audited. Again, that goes back to auditing. We'll come back to that in a second. But you can see there's an incident framework in place. And this sort of goes in hand with our Jira or whatever our change management system is. Sometimes you'll have in here ways to do tickets. Tickets for I need to open a new issue, like issues. So and then the issues get rolled automatically in. And so it's seamless. So help desk has found an issue, a customer called in, there's an error on a page. The issue rolls in, it gets examined, and it gets examined and found that, well, that error also could be used maliciously. So now we see there's a cybersecurity slant to this issue. Maybe not, but again, at least everyone has eyes on that issue when it comes in, and then it can be rolled, prioritized, and rolled into upcoming changes. So I'm going to skip over this. I talked about this already. It's in the chapter. Again, it's hard to quantify these hard numbers. There's times it's going to be up to the team, and it's if that team changes, the numbers might change over time. Better to have something in place than not have this at all, though. Talked about this already. Risk impacts. This is actually pretty good, and this is really should have been back in the previous chapter also when it comes to business continuity planning and even vulnerability assessments. But what's our loss expectancy? If we lose it once, we lost the server, so that's $5,000 gone. But also, what's the loss over time? Well, that server being down every day, we lose X amount of money. So, and this is going to help you in your risk matrix. You'll have that. These two calculations could be part of that. So, again, approaching risk. This is a review. Using some sort of controls in place to mitigate them. and implementation automation and so on. There's some approaches here. The good one here is administrative controls and technical controls. This is actually a good slide. Again, for previous chapters, not everything from a pen test or from a business continuity assessment will be a, hey, we got to patch, patch the operating system. We got to, fix this bug because it causes a SQL injection. Something could be, hey, no one is giving training on the fact that people are opening up attachments on email that says, free Amazon card.exe. And that come to light during your assessments. You go, well, we need to put a control in place. That control could be training. And of course, maybe documentation. And it's best to have these trainings, especially anything with security, be very granular. The idea would be watch this 3-minute video about don't open attachments and take this 2 or 3 question quiz. If you get it wrong, you can take it over again until you get it right. Usually online. And it sounds sort of childish in a way, but it's perfect because one, when this person logs in with their account, maybe they approach the website and they get a single sign-on, SSO. SAML has them already authenticated. When they take this quiz, they say, good, okay, cool. We now have our audit record saying you, employee X, have watched the video and you passed the quiz. So you understand not to open that attachment. This could be go later on for ISO compliance, or showing that you have trained and you audit. You can track who's been trained, who hasn't been trained, and so on. So these administrative controls, one being security policies. Do we have policies in place for that? So I know this class, there's a lot in place where you actually will create policies, and actually we'll look at SANS. SANS has templates you can download and use to create a policy. So you don't have to start by scratch here. All control types aren't just administrative. There's physical controls. Do we need to put another lock on the door? And administrative would be also who owns the key, tracking who has the key, access to who has the key, tracking off when we change the key, and then verifying that lock is correct and has been breached. So detective controls and so on. And again, I talked about already, transference, mitigation, or avoidance. I really call it also acceptance is one of them, dealing with risk. Probably important thing here is automation. There's a lot of stuff that goes on here. And this is where if you have a central control like this in place, maybe Jira, and you have a central logging server that's also producing logs, maybe a dashboard using like Splunk or something like that, or maybe a high-end, more expensive commercial tool that could produce alerts and reports. You have a lot of information you can use to find, is there trends going on? We constantly getting, an error in a certain server or a certain part of our network always going down. It's causing issues here. Again, look at our choke points. Look at those single points of failure. So in any case, automation of these systems is very important. You don't want had to be done manually if all possible. Good example. Network diagram. So you're a brand new security analyst, and you find out, the network engineer created this great visual diagram with all the network. Well, that's perfect. I need that so I can, assess risk to our network. Come to find out, they did it manually 4 years ago, and it hasn't been updated since. So how good is that document now? How good is that artifact? It's basically useless. And I myself have created tons of all kinds of documents on something that I never updated anymore. They become, over time, less and less useful. Automation of these things. I can open an app or a web page that has gone through and has got the latest Nmap scan in XML format, and it puts in a nice presentable format. And I can automatically get that and say, okay, this is from last night's Nmap scan. I can use this to look for certain ports that are open that shouldn't be open. So you want the automation as much as possible. Again, automation provides a lot of great. Really good thing this is it provides the fact that especially if it's tedious work, you don't want to have someone sit down and create that visual diagram once and have to go through once a month and find all the servers and validate it. It's that tedium can leave room for human error, which can leave room for issues to arise. So continuous monitoring is the best if at all possible. So, We do that, of course, for servers. But there's little artifacts like over architectural diagrams, things like that that sort of never get updated. So configuration is one of them. Yeah, you can have in this example. There's a configuration report. I know you can pull, like in Amazon, you can pull this information automatically, and that's awesome. You want that. You want it to be automatically pulled, and you can bring this in. And you can probably even compare this against previous or a known good baseline. And you can see there's a compliant no. User profile has been changed. This is fantastic. So a good example of this was the old Tripwire. I don't know if it's still around. Tripwire app for Linux. Someone changes, adds an account, it sends off an alert, but also I have a report saying this server had this file change. So for security, it's fantastic. You want these sort of configuration guidelines. You also want an ability to review configuration and look for these things right here. And again, not everything's malicious. It's just the fact that maybe there's a new server setup and someone forgot to do the profile correctly. So security policies. This is really the cornerstone. I know there's a lab for this course at the time of this recording again, where you create policies. So I'm not going to delve too much on them. You gotta have policies for them, and most important is they're going to be enforceable. You can't create a policy saying you don't download porn on the company server, company assets, desktop, laptops, whatever. And someone does it, and you go, "Oh, I don't do that." Well, this is where HR will come in. You need to have a way to actually enforce this. And maybe it's not that. Maybe it's the fact you shouldn't have post-it notes with passwords on them. And you do a physical walk around every so often, you find one. You've got to have a way to enforce that. And especially if it's a place that's high security, those things could be of issue. So again, policies, pretty important. Look at the chapter. By the time you get to this part, the very part of this last chapter, we've already talked about policies, but they should be don't make them very long. You don't want one policy that does everything. You want a policy for passwords that's short, easy to read, to the point, and then it has maybe references to best known practices. I'm going to go back and look at our OWASP. Has got those cheat sheets. So maybe you use those cheat sheets to create a policy. Link back to that. That's great. You want to do that. You want to show that maybe you've used NIST. Say this document was generated from this NIST document. So when you do leave, or you're not maybe on vacation, and someone wants to change that, they know that you sort of got that from a larger source. Even better, it looks good because you use these best known sources: NIST, OWASP, SANS, whatever. And you say, I went there, I looked at these best known practices, and here's what applies to us, and here's our policy as it comes to our passwords or whatever the policy you're talking about. So, and again, maybe there's a statement of enforcement inside there. And again, I'll move on past this here. All kinds of policies, acceptable use. A lot of policies are going to happen when someone is first employed. So that's pretty common, like proper use of network, email, company resources. So usually there's some sort of physical signature, acceptance of those policies. But you got to deal with the fact there's new ones coming into play for all users, all employees. So you got to be able to communicate the policy and be sure that someone sees them and has read them. And this is where it goes back to, you need management support. You need to have a way to managers say, hey, part of your yearly review is that your security policies have been all read. You've done all the training. You've done that. You've done the 4 or 5 2-minute videos with 3 questions that would come out each year. And again, having that way to audit that, you can go back and check it. It gives the employee something they can say, yeah, I'm up to date. I keep up on all my internal training. Good. It's good for them. It looks good on their review. And then it sure looks good later for people to get audited as a company, maybe for an ISO or PCI compliance. You can show, yes, we have training, we have policies, we have ways to track that those policies have been read and understood by our employees. So that's where training comes in. Again, I think I already spoke to this. It is a key part of your of keeping security in place.